Hi, everyone. I'm Jess, and I'm the content manager here at Course Report. Course Report is the resource for helping people find the right coding and digital skills boot camps for them. At Course Report, you can research the best coding and digital skills boot camps all over the world, find out which tech skills and programming languages to learn, where to apply, and how to fund your very own bootcamp experience. Today, I'm so happy to have two Tech Elevator grads joining us to talk about how they got hired as software engineers in this past year. Joel Solis is a Tech Elevator alum from the recent cohort in December 2023 and is just about to start at JP Morgan Chase as a software engineer. And Kevin Apollinario is a Tech Elevator alum from 2022 and now a software engineer at Travelers Insurance. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me and the larger Course Report audience today, Kevin and Joel. So I want to pitch this first question to both of you. You both made career changes into software engineering very recently. Why did you choose Tech Elevator to help you make that career pivot into tech? And let's start with Joel.
I actually had a friend who's a director of IoT engineering who recommended me Tech Elevator. He had a few former colleagues that had gone through the program, and they talked very highly about it. And then actually, my dad, his coworker at Progressive, is a former Tech Elevator alum. And I had talked to him as well, and all I got was glowing reviews, and so that was a big reason for me. And then the fact that they have a in-person campus here at Columbus, and they have like local connections to the companies is one of the reasons why I chose them. So.
Oh. And Kevin, what about you?
Yeah, so actually fairly similar to Joel. I had two friends who had gone through the program, and at the time, one of them was still in it. He had not gotten hired yet, and the other friend had actually gone through. He was 2 years into the career. Rave reviews, had heard about some of the risks, but also the reward for going through and really fast tracking into a new job. At the time, I was looking for a new career, which I'm sure we'll get into later. And I think the biggest thing was just I'd heard about boot camps, but knowing people that are my friends who had gone through it and had the success outcome, I was like, okay, yeah, no brainer.
Yeah,
So
it works. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's no secret that the tech job market has been a bit of a roller coaster over the past year. Joel, how did Tech Elevator prepare you for success in this current job market as you were, finishing your cohort end of last year?
Yeah, they prepared me in, I guess, two big ways. One was the interview process, and actually how to interview, right? And in the technical interview, where we actually had a few opportunities to interview with instructors, and then they actually brought in like third-party people to do like a mock behavioral interview, and we got feedback from both of those. And I thought uh, that was just really important for my process, especially going through the hiring process at JP Morgan.
And Kevin, as you were wrapping up your Tech Elevator cohort in 2022, what types of jobs were you applying for?
I was actually targeting specifically banks and insurance companies, for the simple fact that they, from the research I'd done, seemed to hire more people and had tended to have more programs for entry-level candidates than tech companies. Specifically, tech companies were expecting a little bit more versed candidates, people with a little bit more experience, a little bit more competitive to get into those companies, I found. So I decided, okay, I'll target the banks and insurance companies, and it worked out. So.
And were you looking at those entry-level junior dev kind of roles?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Yeah. And Joel, what about you? What kinds of roles were you applying for as you finished up in December?
Yeah. So I'm more focused. I love the cloud development stuff. So I was more focused on trying to find a company that used AWS, because that's a big technology to learn now that we're graduated. And so I knew JP Morgan was big on AWS. They had gone to reInvent, and they actually signed a deal with AWS. And so I kind of made it known throughout my hiring process that I wanted to do that. And then as well, I applied to a couple other companies. Wells Fargo was one, and then Progressive. But JP Morgan was the first to reach out and actually extend an offer. So I ultimately took that one.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into both of your tech job search, your experiences with those. Off the top of your head, like how many jobs do you feel like you applied for over the course of your job search? Kevin, do you want to pitch a number that you think?
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I was very proactive about the job search. I think I started laying the seeds for it, and the networking and the one-on-ones, and um, more than a month before I graduated. And I would say that by the time I graduated, I had applied for at least 100, maybe 150 jobs. And the thing is, I got hired before I graduated. So I think that that doesn't tell the story of like, no, I got rejected a lot. I got a lot of no's. So
yeah, although that is the best scenario to get hired as you're finishing Tech Elevator. That's great. And Joel, what about you? How many jobs do you feel like you applied for?
Probably 75 to 100.
Okay.
So like I graduated December 15th, and then December 13th was like the application for JP Morgan. It's called the ETSI program, like the Emerging Talent Software Engineering Program. So it's for people who don't have a technical degree, so like a comp sci or computer science, right? So I applied to that, and then didn't hear anything for about a month, and then about January 20th is when I kind of heard back like, hey, you have an interview for the final round. So at that point, I kind of like pumped the brakes a little bit on the application just to focus on that. And so I feel like my applications were quite low compared to my colleagues who graduated at the same time.
Yeah, and it seems like Joel, it took you just a few months to land the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you said you were just about to start this April, so it sounds like it was a pretty fast process.
Yeah, it was about a month to get the super day or like final round interview. And then that interview process was one day, two interviews for about 45 minutes each, one behavioral, one technical. And then if they liked you, they usually called you 2 to 3 days after. So like I had interviewed on Thursday, I got the call Monday in the evening. And so it was a pretty quick turnaround. I just wish I could have started, sooner,
Yeah.
but I'm happy waiting. Like everyone's like saying this will be the last break you ever get.
Yeah.
So take it
Make
while
the
you can.
most. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin, when you were on the job search, did you find that there was like a certain tech stack that employers were looking for in new tech hires?
yeah, it's interesting because I feel like it's definitely changed. When I was looking last year, I saw, granted, every job description was a little bit different, but I saw a lot of MERN, which was Mongo Express, React, and Node.js. But now I see AWS is on every application I look at. I'm seeing Python come into play more. I'm starting to see a lot of large language model experience with libraries like LangChain or any of the stuff from Hugging Face. I'm seeing a lot more of that. And so it's shifted to where now, obviously, every company is trying to lasso AI and build something marketable with it. And it's a little bit different than it was when I was looking.
Yeah, that's a great point. Joel, did you find that that is what you were seeing on your tech job search this past year?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely agree with the AWS. So I'm more of like a back-end engineer, so I'm kind of focused on that stuff. And so like AWS, I saw a lot of Terraform. Kubernetes was a big thing. So mostly those three, AWS for sure. So they wanted like the solutions architect associate certification just as a baseline, and then from there, there are other certifications you can go for. But yeah.
So let's talk about the technical interview for a second, because that can be such an intimidating piece of the tech job search. What were the technical interviews like that you both had to go through? Like, was it super important that you got the problem right? Kevin, I'll start with you.
Um, oh, it's so funny because I bombed mine, man. They sent me an assessment and like I didn't think that they were gonna call me back. Oh, it's so bad. Uh, I think I was able to answer 2 of the 8 questions that they sent, and it was some data structures and algorithms knowledge and a little bit of system design mixed in there. But
Mm.
I completely butchered it, and I was like, okay, they're never going to call me back. This was awful. But then they call me, and then I get the interviews, and then a week after that, I was blown away. I actually got the acceptance. But um, yeah, no, it's not as important. It depends where you're interviewing. Like I think if you're trying to get into like Amazon, for example,
Mhm.
you'd better have your P's and Q's with your data structures and algorithms and object-oriented programming. They're expecting a very high level, even for
Mhm.
the entry-level roles. But if you're trying to get into travelers insurance, for example, I can't speak to other companies. I'm not going to say that your technical prowess doesn't matter, but they are looking more for your attitude and your behavior. And is this guy a jerk? Because it's somebody that we want to work with. Are they friendly? How have they handled conflict in the past in their previous roles? I think that stuff is more important than your technical side as a junior specifically.
Kevin, when they called you back for the interviews, did
Mhm.
they tell you, like, did they give you any feedback on your technical portion of the interview, or is it just like done, never talked about again?
Oh yeah, so I asked about it. I tiptoed, so like, oh, okay, what happened with the assessment? And
Yeah.
they told me, well, that's just to gauge where you're at, and it was more of a team matching thing than anything. And to be fair, I did initially get placed on a team where I was still doing engineering work, but it was not nearly as technical as some of the other roles in the company. But again, I was able to grow out of that, and you can.
Yeah.
I think getting your foot in the door is an important thing, right? So.
Yeah. And Joel, what about your technical interview portion for JP Morgan?
Yeah, so it was a little bit different. So the with that application process, after you sent like your information and like your resume in, they sent you um 2 HackerRank problems. So it's like leak code-esque problems. And it was time, so 60 minutes total, 30 minutes for both questions.
Mhm.
First question, I think I was able to pass like 7 out of the 10 test cases. And then the second one I couldn't finish. And so I kind of wrote down comments of like what I wanted to do. And then from there, the actual technical interview with an actual person, um, that was more of like seeing where your knowledge is at. Like, do you know, can you understand and talk about the concept? So I actually had 2 whiteboarding problems. And the first one was more of like, walk me through how you would solve it, and then code it. And then I actually couldn't complete the code. Like I was just kind of nervous. I was like messing up like the syntax and stuff. And he was like, "Hey, like you got the main problem. The answer was a sliding window. Ask answer. So like let's move on." I was like, "Oh God." I was like, couldn't even like code that. And then the second one was more of like, give me 3 answers to this problem. How would what's one way to solve it? Give me another way. What's the hardest way to solve it? And so just being able to talk about, communicate. I think the big thing, harping back to what Kevin said, was being able to communicate, right? Because you have to take, what the client wants, put it into words, and then, reiterate back
Mhm.
what you're actually doing with the code. So communication is key.
Mm. And Joel, you were just recently graduating from Tech Elevator. Were they still available for career support like in the couple of months after you graduated?
Oh yeah, and so I believe it's up to a year now. I think maybe when Kevin did it, it was like 6 months. You could
Yep.
correct me if I was wrong. Um, but now it's up to a year. And so I actually met like with the pathway directors almost on like a daily to weekly basis, just
Mm.
depending on how busy they were. And then on top of that, they actually have an amazing like alumni technical team. Margaret is her name. She holds like Zoom meetings, like maybe like one Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and like reviewing all of the stuff you've learned that we like throughout the program. So like one week is, object oriented stuff. One week is, front end stuff. And so, the whole process, I think after graduating was, it really set you up for success to make sure like you're getting your needs met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like even if you're busy, doing portfolio work or applying to jobs, you should definitely do all of these extra tech elevator things. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And Kevin, you mentioned that networking was a key part of like your tech job search strategy. Like how has that network helped you in your tech career, both on your job search in 2022 and since?
Well, I would say that I have people I consider to be mentors that I meet with once a month, once every 2 months, who I met while I was in Tech Elevator. They came and they did we would have these sort of professionals would come in, talk about their job, talk about different career paths that existed. One guy worked in IBM, his name was Diwaz, and he and I connected and had a one-on-one. I was asking him about his work and what he did because I was in week 2 of Tech Elevator. I could, barely even write a basic for loop. And so I was learning about what he did, and then we ended up liking each other. Again, today we still connect. So meetings like that were really frequent where I took every opportunity I could to connect with people who they were bringing in. And that helped in the job search because while none of the referrals that I got ended up leading to the job I'm working now, I was still able to get referrals and warm introductions and get my resume in front of people in ways that I don't think would have happened if I had just gone through an online system. And then that's how my sort of network through Tech Elevator, that people I met through Tech Elevator helped me. But then Tech Elevator itself, graduating, I felt the biggest benefit was having them fine tooth comb your LinkedIn and your resume, and you practice your pitches and your elevator pitch and your introduction. All this stuff is like razor sharp when you leave, or it should be if you're listening to what they're asking you to do. I think that was the biggest help because I used in the job interview I landed, I used all of that stuff. I used all of my star format questions. I used my elevator pitch, my self introduction. And as I was taking those networking meetings, I was using that stuff even then. So I would say that was the biggest help was the tools that they give you the tools you need to be successful. So if you go out and put the work in, you can do it.
That's awesome. And it's great to hear that their career services portion of the boot camp is super relevant both to, this recent cohort that Joel was part of, as well as yours a year and a half ago, Kevin. I'd love to know if overall, if employers that were taking interviews with you were interested in your Tech Elevator experience or the project portfolio that you created while in the boot camp. Joel? JP Morgan? Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that they like pick these people to interview that Etsy cohort or that Etsy applicants, so like they were spread out across the United States, the different engineers. So I think it was more dependent on, are they local to the area, and like do they know of Tech Elevator? So they were more focused, at least with JP Morgan, they were more focused on what kind of projects I did, what were the frameworks, and stuff like, languages that I used. So they were more interested in that. But, if it's a local company, I mean, I know there are people at JP Morgan who know of Tech Elevator, and I just didn't get that person to interview. So
yeah. And were you able to use your projects in the interview process, Joel? Yeah.
Yes. They asked a few questions about them. It was more focused on like they were big on Java, JP Morgan is, and Columbus as a whole, I would say. And so they wanted to make sure that I understood, the different Java concepts and all that jazz and stuff. So
Yeah. And Kevin, what about you?
Yeah, I'd say more or less mirrors Joel's experience. I had questions asked about the projects, and I used the projects themselves to create talking points to speak to technical challenges, things I learned. You're going to have, after you go through a couple, you're going to have plenty of stories that you can tell from them. But in terms of like walking directly through each one and did they get into the nitty gritty? Not really, but
Mm.
um, there were, again, like I said, talking points surrounding it. It was part of the interview. Yep.
I'd love to talk about soft skills for a moment. And we've already talked about communication in the technical interview as a key component. Kevin, what other types of soft skills were employers looking for when you were on the job hunt?
So one thing that I think is always going to come up, there's some baseline stuff that every company is going to ask about, like, how have you dealt with conflict? How do you work with other people? How do you communicate? Things like that. But I would say at Travelers specifically, they were very pointed on could you work with a team of people? And I see why now, because most of my day, I would say I spend 10%, maybe 20% of my time actually working and coding and writing things, but I spend so much time talking to people at a high level and explaining concepts to non-technical people in order to get business requirements or coordinate work between teams who, one team doesn't know what you do in your application and you don't have a full understanding of theirs either. So I would say that communication and your ability to uh, both perform and understand written communication very well, but also just be, can you be pleasant? Are you friendly and smiley? Can you, does the person want to be around you?
Yeah.
That's the biggest impression I got. And I think I got the biggest, at least my hiring manager who hired me tells me all the time about just being easy to talk to, being a good conversationalist is very important.
Yeah, and I feel like that circles back to how you were talking earlier about your technical interview, and it was really difficult, but that they liked you as a person. That culture fit element is just still really important. We talked a little bit earlier about the tech stacks and how they've changed a little bit to include like Python and large language models now. Joel, with like the rise of these AI tools, did you find that JP Morgan or any other employers that you were talking to were expecting you to like know how to use these kinds of AI tools or even skills?
so at least the jobs I was looking at, they weren't geared towards AI stuff. I know within JP Morgan, if you use like an AI like code completion, like Copilot or anything like that, since it's a bank, right? And JP Morgan handles over about $10 trillion on a day-to-day basis. It's pretty serious infraction, so you can get in trouble, even fired. I think I know they have like an internal tool that like the machine learning AI team that they can speak to more of what they do, but I think like using tools to help you complete code, no.
Good to know. And Kevin, have you seen any like new AI tools in your job at Travelers?
Yeah, but I think my experience here is also going to mirror Joel's in that Travelers such a conservative approach when this stuff came out. It was initially banned for I don't think we even could use ChatGPT until October of last year, and even then, heavily regulated. There you had to go through a training course to even be able to access it, and even then there was things that you could or could not input for good reason. But
Yeah.
I would say that the focus hasn't been so much on do you know how to use them, but there have been plenty of opportunities to work on and build projects that involve them, right? Like at the same time, Travelers doesn't want to get in any hot water through the misuse of them. We also want to build tools like we have internal document loaders. And I was able to work on a project where we were able to take like any relevant documentation that we have, and then you could query a chatbot, so it would pull up things that you would need to find. So there's an emphasis on being able to use it, but I don't think that it's from the context of like you have to know exactly how ChatGPT works and be able to write a large language model yourself. I just think that there's plenty of opportunities to do that if that's something you're interested in most companies, I would imagine.
Good point. So Joel, just thinking back on your recent tech job search, what do you feel like the biggest challenge was that you faced?
Probably imposter syndrome for me, at least. Like there were a few people in my cohort who I thought were better developers than me, like understanding the concepts, and they actually got denied by JP Morgan. And so it was more of like, believing in yourself. And like after I got that offer, I was like, all right, like if JP Morgan believes in me, then like, I can believe in myself as well, right? And so coming from that different career, like so I was a chemist, and then now kind of jumping into software engineering, it's a big thing mentally to kind of get over, because there are people who have 5 to 10 years of experience, right? And you're like, how do you talk like that? Like, how do you know everything? And so it's just it takes time, practice, and a willingness to learn, I think is the big key point. And so just believing in yourself, and after getting that job, understand that you are now a software engineer, and trying to push away the imposter syndrome. I think it's always going to come up, right? But as time goes on, I think it's more being like at peace with that than like not. So.
And Kevin, what about you?
Yeah, I would also have to mirror that. The hardest part was like believing I could do it, because I come from, like Joel, a career switcher. I was working as a professional chef for 6 years, and coming away from that world, I identified so heavily with that, and changing the way that you think about your work and the way that you envision yourself as a professional is not easy, especially with something like engineering, because there's just so much knowledge and so much ambiguity that exists in the day to day that like you are never going to know everything, and you will need to rely on other people in some capacity. And I think coming from an industry where I was expected to be able to put out fires and handle everything, and me saying I don't know was not very acceptable as a response to something, to now it being a lot of times it's a very good response that you can have as an engineer. And again, yeah, the imposter syndrome is, I think you have to fight through it. And once you get your first job and you get through some meaty projects, the confidence will start to build, and you'll feel more sure of yourself. But that's something I think you have to earn. And everybody is going through the butterflies and the apprehension and the doubt at first. So it's normal to feel that way,
Yeah.
At least I did. I didn't know anybody who didn't, for sure.
You should be feeling, a little unsure. Yeah. And I like what you said too about other professions. You have to know exactly what needs to be done and be very certain. But at least coming into the tech world, and probably a mindset you should keep, is just being open to the things that you don't know. And that
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that it's acceptable to say that you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And asking questions when you don't know, right? That's a key thing, is being able to understand when to ask questions, and not just like, yep, I know it, and then you write some random piece of code that doesn't work.
So in addition to sort of this topsy-turvy tech job market that we've seen over the past year or two, it's also a really competitive job market in the tech field right now. I'd love both of your advice to those engineers who are like just starting out, currently on the job hunt, haven't yet landed a tech job. What's your advice to them? Kevin, we'll start with you.
I would say that, it's the job market right now is quite ugly from what I've seen. And well, one, don't let that dissuade you from trying. Don't just put your head in the sand. Well, the job market sucks right now, so you have to. I think the strategy now is to look around and see what do employers want. Like we've talked about, AWS is a huge thing. Maybe you go and get an AWS certification and you build some tiny project using it. Having just being marketable to the employers. You have to look at the job descriptions, look at the companies you're working towards, and see, okay, what are they looking for? What do they want? And then that's your template for, that's how you build the roadmap of what you're going to do in the meantime while you're looking. I would say that open source is a gigantic green flag for most places if you're contributing to that. I haven't done it myself, but I know I've heard that in a lot of interviews that like, look, if you're doing open source, that's a big way to stand out from the crowd.
Mm.
And again, finding those relevant technologies to be able to say, okay, hey, look, I took the time to learn this. Here's how I applied it. You have a project to talk about. And network too.
Oh yeah, networking. Never stop networking. And Joel, what's your advice?
Kind of just echoing kind of what Kevin said. Like AWS themselves have a very good like a platform to learn. It's called AWS Skill Builder. And then on top of that, one of the projects I did was called the Cloud Resume, and it's not just for AWS. There's an Azure one and Google Cloud Platform one, and I actually did that. And then they asked some questions about it during my interview process at JP Morgan, and so it was showing that taking that initiative to jump into something you don't know and learn it, right? That's what I would say is try to push yourself to learn something new. See what at least in your area is being I guess is wanted, right? If it's Terraform, if it's Azure, right? Start learning Azure, and so just taking that first initiative and step to learn. So.
And Kevin, what are your career goals now? You've been in your tech career for 2 years, a year and a half or so. What are you aiming for?
Yeah, just over a year now, and so so what I'm aiming for is I'm still trying to build the experience, still very green, and getting a very strong understanding of data structures and algorithms, because in a boot camp, they cover it, but not to the length that I think that you would need to know, depending on where you want to work. And so I've been spending a lot of time doing that. Again, going back to object-oriented design, but learning about different design patterns within that, and eventually that's going to play into system design. I would like to sprinkle some machine learning in there at some point, at least have a baseline knowledge of it. So there's a lot of things to digest and chew through. It's right now the goal is to just keep doing what I'm doing at my company. Travelers is a great company, and increase the skills, increase my market value as an engineer.
And Joel, you're just about to start your first tech job. What kinds of things are you hoping are coming down the pipeline this year?
So I was big on AWS. So I know at least with two of the teams I'd talked with a couple weeks ago, they both use it. And so I want to ultimately get my solutions architect and then hopefully a professional certificate level one. And then like the ultimate goal would be like a principal, cloud backend engineer within AWS. So that's my ultimate goal. And I think knowing JP Morgan and how they use AWS, that's definitely an opportunity that I can get to. So.
Well, I feel like that's a perfect place to end this Q&A and to wrap it up. Thanks so much for talking with us today, Joel and Kevin, and congrats on your career changes in the past year to 2 years. And thanks to all of you for watching. We're going to be posting a transcript of this video interview on the Course Report blog with contact info for Tech Elevator, just in case you're inspired to apply for any of their upcoming cohorts. And in the meantime, you can follow Course Report on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if you're a bootcamp alum, don't forget to post a review of your coding bootcamp experience on Course Report. Your review is a huge help to anyone who's thinking of getting into tech today.